me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
ECSI fans, do you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all of your sports books and track all of your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You can also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as they're the best account on the platform. Head to the App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire to download the app.
Good afternoon, sports fans from all around the globe. Yes, I'm back. It's that time of the week for the closing bell, the NCAA NFL show with Mr. Ron M. at Ron A Sports for Friday, October 20th, 2023. Shout out to our new partnership and sponsor, WagerWire. If you have not already, please go to Google Play or wherever you download the apps and download it. It's free. And then you can sync your plays with a bunch of different sports books all across the world, basically online, and of course, what state you're in. And if you're feeling like you want to make a few side bucks, Christmas is coming, send an email to affiliates@wagerwire.com. Travis, Zach, and the rest of the team will take good care of you there. Tell them Jeff Dawson from ECSI sent you, and they'll take care of you. Shout out to the gentleman behind the glass, Mr. Joseph Shea, Evan Lewis, Olu Bennett, and of course, Kate Horton. Great work as they get all the cuts, the producing, the editing, and all that good stuff. But it's 5 o'clock. It's Friday. The weekend is here, and so is good friend and colleague, Mr. Ron.
Good morning. Good afternoon, Jeff. Fine Friday today. Nice and sunny and warm out west.
Well, it's dark and dreary in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, as we're getting ready for a couple inches of rain again. But I guess we're blessed because it's not snow or snow season yet. So we're glad there, Ron. As we were talking backstage, a very exciting week in college football last week. The headliner, obviously, Washington and Oregon, went right down to the final second and a kick. And the supposed cherry on top and the final game of the glorious Saturday was supposed to be USC and Notre Dame, an undefeated USC team with Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams and kind of the co-favorite with Mr. Penix Jr. go to Notre Dame, lay an egg. We talked about it on the show. It was a great bounce back spot for a 2-loss Notre Dame team. So let's start there. What did you think of Notre Dame, the defense, Sam Hartman, but more as the egg that Caleb Williams left in the Golden Dome of Notre Dame?
I think we all got spoiled in 2022 that USC's unbelievable plus 20-21 turnover ratio was just going to continue forever and ever. In sports, there's always regression to the mean, probably in other walks of life as well. And USC just was due for one of those regression analysis performances against a very good and assignment sound Notre Dame team. So not surprising at all that would happen. Once it happened in bunches, and USC got exposed, couldn't get their offense rolling, committed turnover after turnover. And Notre Dame didn't have to do that much offensively, just had to take care of the ball and score on short fields. They did what they needed to do. The home crowd helped. Typically, when you have that kind of Notre Dame team, and they're on the fringe with recruiting coming up of being a really good team for a sustainable long period of time, we will see them back into the playoff mix next year. It's a 12-team expanded playoff, remember, next year. So Notre Dame has positioned itself very well. They still have something to play for this year. No losses in conference for USC, so it's going to be very interesting to watch them moving forward. Their goals are still ahead of them, but they got exposed.
Yeah, and I'll go here because I want to get to Washington and Oregon. But Caleb Williams before the game, kind of the co-favorite. Michael Penix Jr. of Washington was the favorite, but Caleb was second. After that loss, you can go get Caleb right now plus 3,000 at some books to win the Heisman. I mean, it's just amazing. You go from co-favorite to plus 3,000. Any value in that ticket, Ron, or is that left the building?
3,000 seems like a lot of value. I wouldn't have guessed that it would be that high, but that was a primetime game that left a very sour taste in people who set the odds. They set them for a reason. We know that Penix, some of the other quarterbacks, Drake May, and so on, there's little margin for error to be the Heisman favorite or one of the Heisman favorites. You just have to have one bad game, just like Caleb Williams has. So not out of the picture yet, but I haven't looked at the Heisman Trophy race. It's not a typical wagering event for me, but I think it's too close to call right now among the favorites.
And I'll stay there for a second because Bo Nix with the loss on Saturday is now plus 2,000. And the only reason I have these numbers off the top of my head, because last night I was on Sports Map Radio co-hosting with Anthony Pepe, and he asked, these were one of the questions that he had for the Beantown Rundown. Michael Penix Jr. now minus like 105 to win the Heisman. But it again is, what have you done for me lately? And it looks like one loss is going to really drop you. Drake May at 10-1 for UNC. I thought the number that stuck out the most to me was the Oklahoma quarterback at plus 700, because in my eyes, we know they always have a hiccup, but they got by the big hiccup of Texas. I think Oklahoma can cheat and get to the rematch with Texas. So a plus 700 number for him looks like where I would be leaning if I had to put say $100 on one of those right now.
For me, depending on how one feels about USC down the stretch, we could be looking at a Washington-Oregon rematch. If Oregon runs the table, the value might be on Oregon's quarterback, Bo Nix, because with his arms and his legs, he didn't do anything that really hurt him. His team and his coach hurt him in terms of late game strategy. I had Oregon as the team that slightly outplayed Washington in that game last week. So I don't see the gap between Nix and Penix other than the one-loss record, which Oregon has a chance to rectify.
And again, that I do agree there at plus 2,000. That's a great price there. The FSU quarterback, I think, is around plus 1,600. Don't know if he'll end up facing an undefeated North Carolina team. So again, it's kind of, what have you done for me lately? Last man standing approach, where I just found some of the numbers, and especially Caleb and Bo, their big drop after one loss there. Let's go to the Saturday game, Washington and Oregon. Great game, battle back and forth. Of course, Twitter and the Twitter drama, everyone talking about blaming the loss on the Oregon coach. I don't want to call him Riverboat Ron because he was consistent. And that's what I said after the game. He was consistent with his fourth down play and going for it before the half. He was consistent. First down gets him the win late in the game, which they didn't get, but Washington scored in just 2 plays. So they had almost 2 minutes to come back and tie or even win the game run.
Yeah, you can look at it from a number of different angles. I don't think it was the right call. But on the other hand, the defenses were, it was tough. These quarterbacks and these schemes, what Oregon is putting together in terms of run pass balance, and what Washington is putting together with DeBoer as head coach there, two wonderful weapons at wide receiver and a very efficient quarterback. It's tough to stop these teams. I still wouldn't have done that, but basically both both teams have a lot of work to do defensively in order to really compete for the national title. They may compete for the Pac-12 title, but I'd like to see a more rounded team in terms of what is possible for the national title.
Well, I'll go to the headliner. I usually like to pick and choose a couple games and then get to the headliner. But let's go right to the headliner. Penn State travels to Ohio State. I saw a true number of Ohio State -6, which there was only one way this number could go. And currently it's right around 4.5. The naysayers, Penn State hasn't played anyone. Franklin can't win the big game. I remember the game last year, Ron, where Penn State was right there with them right before the half, an opportunity to take the lead at the half and a costly turnover. Ohio State gets them at the second half. I think one of Franklin's better teams, like Jim Harbaugh, the best team that Harbaugh's ever had. Give me your thoughts of Ohio State and Penn State. Is Penn State that public trendy dog that all social media is going to be on this week? Or do you like them? Or is it Ohio State that's probably going to win this by a touchdown or more?
Well, probably disappointing to everybody is I'm not going to have a play on the game, but Penn State's a little bit of snake bitten in this particular series. They've led in a lot of the recent games. If you go back 6, 7, 8 years, but then there's a punt return, an interception for a touchdown, a fumble recovery. Something has always got them at the end of these games. Matchup analysis, this really does favor Penn State by a little bit. Both teams are better defensively than offensively in a lot of ways. We're going to find out a lot about Penn State's quarterback this week, who has, I believe, not thrown an interception, but he's going against a Jim Knowles defense. This is Jim Knowles' second year at Ohio State, and that defense of Ohio State is markedly improved. Biggest two takeaways here would be, is Penn State's +10 turnover differential sustainable? If they are even turnovers in this game, with each turnover being worth about 3.75 points, Penn State's losing 7 points of value in this particular game. And that's a lot of value to lose against a quality team like Ohio State. That has me concerned about Penn State. The other thing is, a lot of times teams get love for running the table in terms of being against the spread, where Penn State, everybody looks and says, wow, Penn State's covered the spread every week. Not really, I say. Penn State covered because of the kneel down that wasn't a kneel down, that they threw that touchdown pass at the end of the game when they were up 1 million points. And then going forward against West Virginia, and including in the last 3-4 plays of the game when they were up 16, they didn't need to go up 23. They didn't really cover those games. That was James Franklin doing James Franklin things. So I think those kinds of issues concern me about Penn State. So even though there's matchup analysis favoring Penn State, I prefer to watch and learn.
I truly call it a popcorn game, so I'm with you on that one for sure. I really, this game intrigues me, and I know I know Paul Stone have had some winners on the other side here. Last night we talked to the color play-by-play guy for the Boston College Eagles and asked him. They're coming off a bye week. They traveled to Georgia Tech. My true number was 4.5 with a 56. Now 5.5 with a 56.5. I like BC in the spot. Get them to 500, a game above. Get them to thinking bowls. They got a game next week at home against UConn. They should be able to get that as well. My assumption thinks that you like Georgia Tech this week.
Yeah. No, I don't think I like Georgia Tech, but I can find reasons to like both teams. I prefer not laying points with Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech has a habit of playing close games. Boston College, I believe, has a habit of playing close games this year. So games are being decided at the end. The stat sheet would favor Boston College. My power numbers actually put this game at 7. So we have conflict there. I think the line should be higher, but I also think that Boston College has more than a fighting chance in this game, especially where we got a total of around 56.5 in this game. So points are going to be scored. That means no team is going to be out of this game. There's definitely a chance that who's ever behind can play catch up. We've seen Georgia Tech get a mysteriously lucky win against Miami of Florida. And we've also seen Boston College come back in some games. So my only lean would be for the dog in this game. But the numbers, while they support it versus the running numbers, they don't support it versus the power numbers. 7, I might be a little bit intrigued.
Xavier wants to know, Ron. Ron, who would you wager on the Pac-12 given the current future numbers on the board? My assumption is that you were leaning Oregon.
I would probably lean Oregon, but I don't know the numbers on the board. I apologize for that. So I don't know, Xavier, if you know what the numbers we're talking about, then I could tell you whether or not I think it's value on Oregon. I still think Washington has a very tricky game at Oregon State. I think that's a dead solid toss-up game. And I don't think Oregon's going to be an underdog the rest of the way. So it's a rematch. And then in the rematch, it's going to be a 50-50 game. So it's not going to be a lock that Oregon runs the table. Oregon just has to get there. And if they get there and you think it's 50-50, then even money would be the right play. But I would say, I don't know what the odds are. So I'll just say off the top of my head, 2-1 or more would definitely be value.
Want to go down further there. My eyes don't deceive me here. This a couple weeks ago, maybe 3-4 weeks ago, you would have thought would have been a real headliner. Then the pure stupidity on the Hurricanes a couple of weeks ago against Georgia Tech, and in comes a Clemson team with 2 losses. My true number was Clemson 2.5 with a 49.5. It's got to the magical number of 3 with a 48.5 at the Circa right now at Las Vegas. Does Dabo and company come into Miami, or is this the coach finally waking up and we see the Warren Sapp, Vinny Testaverde, Bernie Kosar, Miami Hurricane, the U show up?
As I understand it, there's some concern about Miami of Florida's quarterback's health. If Van Dyke goes, I make the line 2. So if it's 3, I mean, at one point it was Clemson 4, which was too much value. Even Clemson 4.5, I believe, at Circa openers. So I think there was too much value there. I will kind of call this the Ron special. And what I mean by that is, I don't really care much about wagering on this game. What I care about is who loses this game, because this is the last chance for Miami of Florida to salvage their season. They don't care if they have 3 losses. There's no goals left. If Clemson has 3 losses, they have no goals left. Play the freshmen, play the redshirt people, and so on. If at all possible, I'm going to look to fade the team that loses this particular game, because I think the motivation really drops down. So I'm hoping for a hard-fought, great game where somebody loses and it just sucks the air out of them. This particular game doesn't really offer me an edge. I like both defenses. I think both defenses know what they need to do. They create different plays. They create challenges for both offenses. I worry probably a little bit more about Miami of Florida's play calling. I like Clemson's run game a little bit better. But at the current price, when we're not talking about 4.5, I would have no play on this game.
And the last game that I'll talk about in college before we go to the NFL a few weeks ago would have been a great game. The upstart Duke Blue Devils now, obviously with quarterback issues. My true number 13 with a 49, now up to 14 and a half. Duke's defense surprisingly has been great this year, undefeated till Notre Dame came into town. Now they travel to Tallahassee to number 3, number 4 ranked Florida State, undefeated. I know the quarterback issue. I guess my first question is, can Duke's defense slow Florida State down? Number one. Number two, offensively, will they be able to get to 17 or 20 and make this a competitive game?
Yeah, this is a fascinating game because Duke's coach has outperformed all expectations with the roster, with the schedule they have this year, which is a bump up from last year. I like everything about what Duke is doing in terms of planning, not only for now, but for the future. But there's a tremendous difference between having Riley Leonard at quarterback and their second string quarterback who couldn't do a thing. And luckily for them, wasn't asked to do anything last week. If Riley Leonard suits up and we think he's reasonably healthy, with what Echo's defense has done, I think they can slow down Travis and the Florida State offense. I would be mildly, if not actually having a play at plus 14 and a half, I think is the current line with Riley Leonard at quarterback. I wouldn't touch the game at all other than maybe the unders and thinking that there will be a defensive score in this game, which you could usually get 2.5 to 1 odds on if Riley Leonard did not play in this game. It becomes an ugly game, and whoever forces the turnover, not the dropped interception, but the actual interception, the fumble recovery. Two completely different games with Riley Leonard and without Riley Leonard.
This team quietly, undefeated, the first game of the year, that win against LSU, and then obviously the win at Clemson, which I'm still PO'd about because we had Clemson. They had that game won. No way of keeping Florida State out, right? If they cheat.
If they sweep, they're in. If they have one loss, they're probably still in because of carnage of the rest of, in the rest of the conferences. But in reality, the ACC is not all that great. And so I don't know if a one-loss team should really win tiebreakers. But you mentioned that conference championships do carry some weight this year. If Florida State was a one-loss team with a conference championship win, I guess that would carry some weight. And let's face it, they have looked very good this year, not taking anything away from them. Maybe with a one-loss team, even with that schedule and even with the ACC, they do deserve to be in. They're a quality team.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's funny because, we always, our eyes are on the SEC where, an undefeated Georgia team plays a one-loss Alabama team. And Georgia has no incentive because they know even if they lose, they're still in the Final Four. Go back a couple of years ago, and they didn't want to give up their playbook, and then the rematch, of course, and then they beat them then. So where these conference championships will mean a ton this year. Xavier said plus 240 on Oregon it is.
I would restudy the schedule. Won't do it right on the show right now, but I will say that sounds like value to me. It's over 200. All you need to do is get them into the title game. And then it's 50-50 from there because their power rating is going to be right in line with anybody else's if they get into the title game. So can you find another loss in Oregon's schedule? That's the key. And then you start doing mathematics in terms of percentage of win for each one, and then you accumulate it. I think there's still a possibility that USC loses at least once, which is what they would need, and Washington loses at least once. So I think Oregon's firmly in the mix. 240 sounds like a deal to me.
And I kind of slipped right over it. The assumption is USC bounce back spot, no Cam Rising. Number was 6.5, now touching 7. We know USC in their defense. Lincoln Riley, Caleb now on a bounce back, must win all the way through here. Would have been nice to see Cam Rising. Utah has had some great success against the Trojans in the past. expecting the bounce back here, and that number is kind of high with such a good Utah defense, Ron.
Yeah, again, reasons to like both sides. USC is an excellent bounce back team from double digit losses. So I have to take that into account. I don't, surprisingly to me, on my numbers, and I do a lot of manipulation with the data in terms of taking sacks out of the equation and kneel downs out of the equation. Pure running data doesn't have a side in this particular game. I would definitely lean to Utah because of how well coached they are. With all that being said, but I don't have a lot of metric stuff that I could stand on.
All righty, let's tiptoe over to the NFL, and I can't wait for your top five because, as you and I both know, it's the NFL, which stands for not for long, and to expect the unexpected. And last week, not one but two undefeated teams both go down in flames. A San Francisco 49er team travels to the dog pound in Cleveland without Deshaun Watson, 9-point favorites. And let's just say an inspired PJ Walker in the Cleveland defense coming off the bye week. Great comeback win. And then even Brock Purdy got him down for a field goal to win the game. And the last play of the game, wide right. And then we go over to Philadelphia, who traveled to New York without Aaron Rodgers. And again, like opening week, against the Buffalo Bills, an inspired defense. I can't believe I'm going to say this, a Zach Wilson, where they knock off that Philadelphia Eagles team. And I told you, Ron, before, the Eagles kind of remind me of the Georgia Bulldogs, kind of going through the motions, not looking inspired. Something's going on with Devonta Smith because it's just Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown. Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown. We'll get to that. Thoughts of the NFL and what you saw in the second quartile and in week 6 last week?
Yeah, it was a tough week for coaching decisions. There were numerous coaching decisions that failed. We're seeing people overuse analytics or not understand analytics or think that it applies to them when they have to rely on analytics. Yeah, it's improved the game, but you have to know your team. How's your offense against that defense? And be in the moment. And a lot of these coaches haven't been in the moment. So we saw a lot of that. We also saw a lot of injuries again. And I'll talk about that when we close the show because I have a thought about all that stuff. But, San Francisco, they're in my top. They're still number one. How can you ding them for a performance that they had at Cleveland when McCaffrey goes down, when Kittle's still probably not 100%? When Trent Williams is in a walking boot after the game, when Dre Greenlaw doesn't even play in the game, and so they give up more running yards in that game than almost in the first 3 or 4 games combined. And who am I leaving out? Deebo Samuel goes down. So San Francisco is clearly still my number one team. Philly was not in the top 5. We talked about it last week. So something has been missing all year with that. They were tied with Detroit, but lo and behold, Detroit's defensive-minded win at Tampa Bay carries tremendous weight. Detroit's firmly in the top 5 now, a place that they haven't been since the internet was invented. So congratulations to Detroit for being where they are right now. So it's going to be interesting on how these teams bounce back. But it was an unusual week for the top teams in the NFL, which allowed the Miami Dolphin undefeated team to pop their champagne bottles last week.
I forgot about that. Yes, indeed. 1972 to be exact. I want to go over to one of the best games of the week. We'll get into the 8 o'clock primetime game on Sunday. The Chargers last week played Dallas on Monday night. Kind of a grab ass back and forth. Chargers had their opportunity coming off the bye week. The Kellen Moore revenge game. Austin Eckler back. And yet at the end, it was the Dallas Cowboys standing. Now the Chargers travel to Kansas City where Herbert has played well. He does have a win there. It is now an absolute must win for the Chargers. My true number was 6. It's gone down to 5.5. I love the Chargers in this spot. I think they'll cover. I think you should sprinkle a little bear and pizza money on them to win this game outright. A Kansas City team who has not lost since opening night at home against the Lions. Talk me off the ledge, Ron. Tell me no, 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 Mr. Dawson, not so fast.
Normally, I would talk you off the ledge and saying you've got the right play. But this was one of our feature games that Chris and Ted and I talked about a little bit earlier, because that's a Sports USA game, LA Chargers and Kansas City. So for a full analysis of that game, I'd encourage people to go back to that. But for purposes here, I'm worried about the Chargers' morale. I'm worried about how they find ways to lose games. And they almost have that feeling, here we go again, something's going to happen. I know they play Kansas City tough. I know that they match up well against Kansas City, and there's not a lot to learn about the two teams, even with the short week. My concern is that it is a short week. They have 6 days, and Kansas City has 10 days. That gives Travis Kelce extra time to get well. And you know he's just going to be open because he's always open, and he's certainly going to be open against the Charger defense. Rashee Rice, who's one of my favorite rookie wide receivers, is just going to be incorporated more and more into the offense. The guys that run the ball for them, Pacheco in particular, runs so hard that I think that's going to be a problem for the Chargers. I think the Chargers, again, match up well against them. It's on Herbert to score toe-to-toe with Mahomes, because I think Kansas City is going to score in this game. I mentioned on the show a couple of hours ago that I thought Herbert's thumb, while on the other hand, was bothering his rhythm. I thought he threw high and fast on a number of throws on Monday night. Maybe he was over-trying. Maybe Kellen Moore was over-trying. That was relatively a toss-up game against Dallas, but I kind of got the feeling the whole game that somehow the Chargers would come out on the short end because it's the Chargers. I normally at 4 points or more, I like the Chargers because they have a historically great record as a dog of 4 or more. So I could easily see this game being a nail biter. Something scares me about this game, and maybe it's just because the rebound factor and the morale factor of the Chargers.
Yeah, I think that was a great call on your part going back to Monday, because you could tell by the first quarter towards the end of it, even though both teams scored on their first drive. So we're like, buckle up, it's going to be a shootout. It didn't end up that way. The Micah Parsons of the world, they were putting too much pressure on Herbert, and you could see him, as he's trying to run and then as he's getting tackled, really favoring that left hand. So I think it could be a problem moving forward. And I think you're spot on. That number at 6 only could go one way. Kansas City will probably end up being on top here. What was the under over here? Kansas City, 48. You're probably right. This will probably end up there 27-20, 24-20 and a late Bucker field goal, 27-20, and they get the 1 point cover there. So
I will say one thing to close. Let me say one thing to close on that one, is that one asset the Chargers have that I didn't mention before is, for whatever reason, we've finally seen a pass rush out of them. They have 21 defensive sacks. If they are to compete with Patrick Mahomes, that has to continue.
I agree. And Mr. Sailor's in the house. He goes, he missed a half hour. No problem. You can go back to my YouTube channel if you wanted, East Coast Sports Investors, and replay it. He said Herbert was rushed by the Dallas pass rush. Absolutely. Mr. Parsons is a force to reckon with. Almost like we're watching a mini Lawrence Taylor at some points there. So before we get to the game of the week, I got to bring up 45 minutes south Gillette Stadium. The 1-5 New England Patriots host the Buffalo Bills, and the Bills were the Bills on Sunday. We're waiting for that 40, 45-point outburst. In come the Giants team. No Daniel Jones. Saquon tried to gut it out. Played grab ass the whole time, and Bills win in a close game where the Giants almost could have stole that. They come into New England only an 8.5-point favorite. Something smells here. The Patriots can't score in the first quarter. So Bills first quarter -0.5, -1 looks like a layup. The Patriots can't score in the second quarter. So Bills first half -5 looks like a bigger layup. What am I missing here? Because something tells me that the Patriots are actually going to hang around here.
If you trusted the Patriots, it would probably be a good spot because, let's face it, Buffalo was one of maybe 5 teams that should have lost last week, but didn't. Seattle should have won. They blew a bunch of opportunities in the red zone. New Orleans should have won. They blew a bunch of opportunities. The Giants killed themselves. The Giants really outplayed Buffalo on Sunday, and there's a couple of other instances as well. It was just that kind of flip thing. Even San Francisco on a 41-yard field goal could have won. So we saw a lot of that. My problem with New England, and I did go on a 5-minute rant on the last show, is that New England has lost it. I mean, absolutely lost it. If anybody wants to hear what I truly thought about New England and how disappointing and sad and almost pathetic and what the franchise is becoming, and going on a 9-minute drive, 9-minute plus drive, down 19-10 in the fourth quarter with no sense of urgency, having the kicking game go completely bonkers this year, 4 for 8 field goal kicker, having the turnover ratio be -8 or roughly in that neighborhood, something that Bill Belichick's era has never seen. I think the body language in New England has to be rock bottom. This Buffalo is not a complete team right now, but Buffalo has Josh Allen, who has done a few things with his arm and his legs to frustrate New England. So I'm completely setting this game aside. I don't have an interest in this game. Will the real New England step up? I think we've seen the real New England, and that's more disappointing and sad for the NFL than anything else.
The game of the week, Sunday night, 8:20 kickoff. The Miami Dolphins travel to Philadelphia. My true number, believe it or not, was Philly -0.5 with a 51.5. It's currently Philly 2.5 with a 51.5. The assumption is Philly back home, bounce back spot, the brotherly love push, whatever they call that stupid thing. And then trying to compare the Dolphins when they played the team at Buffalo, get steamrolled by the Bills, the last good effort by the Bills, and the Bills put up 40 there. I think everyone will be on the Eagles. I kind of think the Dolphins are getting a little disrespected here. I expect the Eagles to bounce back, but I think you might have something else to say to me right now.
I might have something else to say to you because, and I might be in the minority here, but since Philly's never been in my top 5 power ratings and Miami has been for the past 4 weeks or so, I would have made Miami a 1.5 point favorite in this game. Probably 1 because I give more weight to home field advantage on standalone Sunday games and standalone Monday games. So I think if this was a standalone Sunday afternoon game, I would be telling you I already played Miami. But I can't tell you that. I can tell you that if it goes to 3, I will be not forced to play Miami, but based on power rating success over 30, 40 years, I would be playing the number, just like I played the number on Jacksonville. The number was wrong. The number would be wrong if Philly, according to my numbers, if Philly was a 3-point favorite. Now, you mentioned Devonta Smith a little bit earlier. He had an opportunity to catch, I think it was a 50 or 60-yard touchdown pass. And I don't know if he dropped it or just something was wrong with the connection. They did try to unleash him, and that throw just missed. And we've seen a lot of Jalen Hurts throws just miss. This Miami defense gives them a chance to get things right. It's not a great Miami defense, but I am fascinated with the matchup because Miami throws so many things at you offensively. that maybe we're looking at a track meet in this particular game. The only way I can look is Miami, but I completely understand and would not be shocked if Philly took care of business in this game. I think that standalone Sunday night atmosphere should be partially factored into the analysis. I don't know that everybody agrees with that or disagrees with that. Again, we have a turnover ratio differential, +8 for Miami, -7 for Philly. Some of that is artificial. If that goes back regression to the mean, then Philly picks up some free points. So I'm not overly enthusiastic about taking Miami, but based on my numbers, that's the only side that I would look at.
Yeah, when again, I personally learned the hard way, you know, 45 years my first wager was in 75. And so I learned the hard way when you bring emotions in. This is why I love our sport, and I hope it never ends, Ron, because you bring data and analytics. It's about numbers. I always talk about it's not about the logo in the front or the name in the back. It's not about trends, isn't always your friends. Not that we don't take all that information in, but when we try to bring the emotions in and the bounce back, the must wins, or even the thought is coming off an emotional loss. We don't truly know what to expect, but our mind wants to tell us, well, Philly and the 49ers, oh, there's no way they're going to lose two in a row. It's a perfect bounce back spot.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what we've been saying for New England for years and years. And now you can't trust that, oh, it's New England kind of situation. That's why, for me, there are three factors of handicapping. There's the power numbers that tell me what the line should be based on my line. And when there's a discrepancy of a certain length, that's very meaningful to me. There's the matchup analysis. How does San Francisco look against Cleveland's defense versus how will they look against Minnie's defense? You have to take into account the key metrics, the key stats, the key components. Technical analysis, matchup analysis, whatever you want to call it, is a key component. And then there is situational analysis to factor in. Fatigue, coming off a tough game, standalone revenge games early in the season. To some extent, maybe to a large extent this year, in cluster injuries. So there's three components, and when they all align, that's wonderful, but sometimes they counteract each other.
And before you close here, hats off to the Jaguars here. I mean, in what world do you get a team that spends 2 weeks in London, then comes home for a home game, and then they give them a travel on a short week? I know it was only Jacksonville to New Orleans, but this team, who before London was a team trending in the wrong way, has now quietly won 4 in a row.
Yeah, hats off to them. And I agree. If it wasn't such power rating value, and power rating dogs are meaningful to me, Jacksonville, I could have easily passed the game. But then you got Dennis Allen on the other side of the equation. And I did tweet out a couple of things about Dennis Allen. I will miss him when he's fired as the coach at the end of this year. It's really too bad. I'll try to lobby that he stays, but I don't think I'm going to carry enough clout.
And I'll close on the Saints here. Listen, I was watching on Sunday with the other 8 games going on. I was watching, I call him check down Charlie here with Derek Carr. And if he threw 40 passes, 38 of them were 7 or 8 yards. He couldn't throw a 15-yard pass if it wasn't for a hook and lateral. And he had 330 yards last week. And then I watched him again this week. My gut's telling me this, Ron, at the end of the year that he's going to have shoulder surgery or something. It's like one of these. He threw it down the sideline to Olave, just like to tell the world, hey, I can throw it that far. And he threw it 20 yards out of bounds. Do you think there's something wrong with this guy's shoulder? Like he really shouldn't be out there?
He's been hurt recently, and I know he's been on the injury report, but I blame coaching. The coaching hasn't changed.
Okay.
The quarterback coach is the offensive coordinator. He's been there for 17 years. The sense of urgency, and there was some for New Orleans, but not until it was 24-9. Then he started throwing downfield. How many times did you count? I counted 3 where it was 3rd and let's say 5 or 6, and they threw a 3 or 4 yard pass and had to punt on 4th down or go for it and either hit or miss on 4th down. That scheme just doesn't work in today's NFL. Maybe it works if you have Miami throwing a slant pass and the guy is just so fast compared to the rest of the league. But Kamara isn't that kind of guy. Kamara is a wonderful pass catching option, but he doesn't have burners like Tyreek Hill or the running backs in Miami. So you can't use that scheme. And why are you waiting to use it until you're down 24-9? I think it's coaching.
And I was trying to remember, like in the late years of the Brady era, where again, I remember when he got Brandon Cooks and he could not ever throw it deep to him because he couldn't get it to him. And it was always Brandon Cooks running the wrong route. That's why he only lasted a year. And then it just dawned on me who Carr reminds me of. It was last year's Mac Jones. It was 3rd and 7 and they throw 4 and 5 yards. And it just dawned on me. I knew there was someone else. It's exactly what Mac Jones looks like. And before we close, I skipped over this. I apologize, Hector. Hector wanted to say Chargers in Herbert era getting 4 or more points, 1-8 straight up, but 7-1-1 against the spread. Average line 6.4 there. And Russell added this, and he was asking a question here. Let me see if I can pull it up here. He wants to know who else in the AFC is as well-rounded as the Jags. He says, good D, good coach, good QB, good line, good weapons. Am I missing anyone else?
The only thing you're missing is I cannot stand that general manager. He had a chance in the 2022 draft to put the rest of the league away, and he punted on the deepest draft in NFL memory. And last year, a draft of 13, he drafted 7 players that did not make my worthy of NFL board. And I've never had 7 players from a team not make my NFL worthy draft board. This is a very good team that can compete with anybody. It could have been the top team in the NFL. So the on-field product, whatever they have a coach who understands them. They have a good defense. They have a good offense, more than a good defense and offense. They have run-pass balance. But boy, this thing could have been spectacular with a different GM. That's my only gripe.
And you know who's really looked good for them this year, and he's finally getting into space, is ETN. Still from a fantasy standpoint, doesn't catch enough passes, but ETN has looked fabulous. And then the Calvin Ridley hype, it was kind of comical because, here comes Calvin Ridley, and I think he's had one good game, only one catch last night, but Christian Kirk, who everyone forgot what he did last year, was quietly stepped up as well.
And their tight end Ingram is a very valuable resource as well. And we can't forget that ETN and Trevor Lawrence have spent a number of years together, Clemson and Jacksonville. So there's some familiarity there, and it helps when you know where somebody's going to be and where they're supposed to be on the field.
Well, Mr. Russell Sale, it grabs the 10-1 that they get to the Super Bowl. Russell, days of Mark Brunell, Jimmy Smith, Fred Taylor, Mr. Coughlin. Here we go in Jacksonville. So as we always close out this show, I give you a nice little 10-yard button hook, and the stage is yours with your Ron closing thoughts.
Random thoughts, 2 random thoughts. First of all, coaches on the hot seat. These are my 3. New Orleans. I would fire him in a second. And I think with all the talent, considering the blasé teams that they have to face, Atlanta is one-dimensional. Carolina's 0-6 and completely in rebuild mode. They don't have the roster. And then you have, who am I missing? Atlanta, Carolina, New Orleans, and Tampa Bay, who basically runs an offense tailored to playing defense and hoping Baker Mayfield can manage the game, which he does very well, Baker Mayfield, but he's not a 30-point guy. New Orleans coach should be gone. I have a problem with Atlanta's coach. I think he should be on the hot seat. Speaking of that division, I think they run an offense that's run first. They lack speed They don't trust their quarterback. They don't throw the ball very much. I know they've thrown the ball a lot lately, but that's by necessity more than anything else. It's by the fact that they play teams with better run defenses. And the LA Chargers, at some point, doesn't this get changed? I would close out and swap out all three of those particular coaches. Jeff, who wants an 18-game season? After last week's injuries to 11 key players, are we really going to talk about a watered down product by the time we get to week 17, 18, and then week 19? I don't want to hear anything about an 18-game season in the NFL and saying that player safety is improved. The injuries are crazy. Scoring 13 unders and 2 overs last week. Why was that? It was because team defenses have caught up. They understand the RPO. They're not given the deep ball. They're making teams go down the field. Injuries to quarterbacks are crippling teams. Cluster injuries to offensive line. We've seen it on 3 different teams. It's crippling how teams move down the field. The run game actually hasn't been as exciting as it has. The yards per carry is down this year after 4 years of spectacular improvement, and sacks are way, way up. Teams are rushing the quarterback. They're getting in people's faces, and they're causing the game to change that way. And not everybody has a Tyreek Hill to take the top off the defense. That's kind of my thoughts right now. I don't think we want to see an 18-game season. I think we want to somehow improve play. We have to continue to improve player safety, or we're going to have too many players down. And I think scoring will improve. It was at its low point last week, but there are ways that I think defenses have learned to adjust to what's going on with offenses, other than Miami's so far.
So you'd be against the taking the preseason out, adding the 18 games, and going to the 2 bye weeks?
Absolutely, because you don't get enough. I know they have unpadded scrimmages and this and that with teams, but that would be a disservice to undrafted rookies. That would be a disservice to people who were drafted in the 4th, 5th, 6th round who actually could become superstars. There's starters on the New York Giants. There's starters throughout the league that were drafted 6th and 7th round, or even an undrafted free agent that might never get a chance if we just had 2 preseason games. And you saw how sloppy week 1 and week 2. Chris and I have talked about this a lot in recent seasons. We're not ready to trust the NFL data until at least week 3, because week 1 and week 2 is so sloppy. It's just going to get worse if these guys are not playing 60-minute games, and then they're asked to play these 18 games. And then you need 2 bye weeks, and you need to extend the season anyway. And I don't think the NFL is willing to have 2 bye weeks. And pretty soon we're going to have international games, 1 a week. So it's spiraling out of control, in my opinion. Hector makes a point. I don't know if you can hear me, but Hector makes a point where
I thought I lost.
Yeah, I hope I'm here. Hector makes a point that says that the refs might be given a memo or something like that to say, let's call it fewer holding and this and that. It's possible. I hope that's not the case.
Last on the hit list, you talked about 3 coaches on the hot seat. You left the local down the road here. Does Bill return, or rumor has it they've already talked Mayo into staying for that reason, that they were going to pass it over to Mayo? Do you think Bill returns next year?
It's kind of up to Bill. I think he's earned the right to make that call. You could go the coach in waiting route, where Bill says, I'm going to coach for 2 more years. I'll sign this. I want to turn it around. I want to get the youngsters. They drafted 13 guys or 14 guys. So he clearly has an investment in these people, although we'll probably cut half of them before the summer's out for next year. I think you work a deal and you do it that way. But I think Bill has earned the right to make that call.
All right. The scroll has been going the whole time. A lot of people watching here today, Russell, Hector, and the rest of the crew. Thank you, guys. If you haven't subscribed, run over to YouTube in case you came in late. East Coast Sports Investors, subscribe. It's for free. Ron, before you leave, tell them where they can find all your work, Wager Talk, podcasts with Chris, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm busy during the week, especially early in the week. I'm writing the articles for Sunday and Sunday to be published Monday and Monday to be published Tuesday. Check out Wager Talk. You can see it on my particular X Twitter timeline when these articles come out. Chris and I do live brainstorming on Tuesday. We had a very productive, maybe not entertaining to the masses, but very productive session this past Tuesday where we talked about in-season win totals. That was a working brainstorming session for both of us. We both learned a lot and got a lot out of that. And then doubleheader Friday for me, where I work with Ted and with Chris on doing the games of the week for Sports USA, and then close out the week with you, Jeff.
Well, we can't thank you enough. I definitely kept you overtime this week. So I'll keep an eye on the clock next week. Maybe I'll have to throw the red flag at myself and not ask as many questions. We had a lot of questions from the gallery. So for myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, the one, the only, Mr. Ron Marmalevsky at Ron A Sports. We wish everyone a blessed evening. The weekend is here, guys. Enjoy the games on Saturday and Sunday. And we'll catch you early next week.